So a bit about this video is that I recorded it a while ago, like at the beginning of this year, 2023. And so while I still hold everything I said to be true, I just wanted to give you that extra context. But yeah, hopefully you enjoy it, and let's get to it.
Look, the title is quite clickbaity. I don't think it's going to replace all of my medical school teachers. I just think that teaching is really, really hard, and some people just aren't suited for it, and that's fine. Except when they end up as teachers. I've been struggling to understand my physiology teacher for 3 semesters now. The only way I've been passing his class is because I have notes from past students who have thankfully understood it and written down the notes in a way that I understand it too. But just yesterday, I found out how I can replace my physiology teacher with ChatGPT. And I mean replace literally. We've got exams coming in like around a couple of weeks, which is terrifying to say, honestly. But that means that I have a short amount of time to cram in a lot of information. And on top of that, we have class for 4 to 6 hours every day, and then we've got to study for 4 to 6 hours every day. So the stakes are really high because I need to be able to understand and ingest a lot of information in a short period of time. And the faster I can do that with complex physiological topics, the easier my life will be for exams and just the better I'll do. So obviously the stakes are quite high, but this is where ChatGPT comes in and becomes like my saving grace for understanding complex physiological topics and complex med school topics. And here's how I kind of discovered how I could use ChatGPT. So I was sat down and I was studying the eye and the physiology of the eye and the retina and how like a photon arrives and then the whole transduction mechanism. I won't bore you with the details. It's pretty interesting, pretty complicated stuff. And in this complicated stuff, there's these cells called bipolar cells, which can be either center on or center off. And I couldn't wrap my head around how these center on and center off cells work and how they're different because of a whole other bunch of things. And I kept reading my notes to no avail. And I kept reading other people's notes to no avail. And I made a small map, like a linear map, just so I could visualize the concept and map it out physically from my mind out onto a piece of paper to no avail. I tried Googling the cells and definitions to no avail. So finally I asked ChatGPT to some avail, because it gave me a reasonable explanation as to what these cells do and what they are, but it wasn't enough for me to feel like I knew this and I could explain it back. And I had the idea of using ChatGPT as my teacher, treating it as a person who you can discuss with. But it's a bit more complex than that. The very bare bones, simple way I use it is by bouncing ideas back. For example, I asked it, hey, so tell me about these bipolar cells. Explain them to me. And it did. It gave me this reasonable explanation that just wasn't in depth enough. So I asked it for more depth, which it provided, and that was good. But then it's really easy for me at least to read something and feel like I know it, but then not be able to explain it 2 minutes after. So I thought, I'll just talk back to it and explain it back and ask it to correct me if I'm wrong, which I did. It explained where I was wrong. I tried again. I was still wrong, and by the 3rd time I had gotten it, and I understood now what these bipolar center on and center off cells were. But the crucial aspect here is that you can ask it to correct you when you're wrong, or to fix your mistakes, or to point out your mistakes and how you can correct them. And it will do that 100 times, 1,000 times, until you understand or until it thinks you understand. And that was great because I could do that with my teacher in theory if my teacher was better at explaining and if he had unlimited patience and unlimited time, which he doesn't and I don't. And even if he did, I don't think he would explain it as clearly or as diversely as ChatGPT can. However, there is a bit more depth to this as well. With AI, I found that the output is only as good as the input, and if you ask it to explain something, it will, but if you go into a bit more detail or your prompt is just a little bit better, it'll just like the output will be like so much more appropriate, better, well adapted, etc. What I do is 3 things. Specific prompt where I outline what I want it to give me, and I assign a role to it as well. Teacher GPT, or like physiologist, anatomist GPT, blah blah blah, whatever, botanist GPT, whatever. If you give it a role, it'll give you a bit more specialized information back. The second thing I do is I specify what my role is. I'm a second year medical student, I'm studying physiology, blah blah blah. I have an exam on physiology, these are the topics, blah blah blah. If you're a high school student, it will give you a different output than if you're a PhD writer or if you're writing your dissertation or something. And finally, it's that you can zoom in or zoom out in terms of complexity as many times as you can. Simplify this, explain this in different ways. Can you expand a bit more on this? Can you go a bit more in depth? And it will just do that, and then you can just repeat it back, or be like, actually that's a bit too complicated, blah blah blah, and then repeat the simplified version back, etc. There is a couple of disclaimers though. Sometimes it can be wrong. ChatGPT is a machine, and sometimes machines are wrong, and the internet is wrong, and not everything you read online is true, and the same goes for ChatGPT. Sometimes it can be wrong, and it works best when you know a bit of what you're talking about, and you can spot a few mistakes in what it's saying. But if you ask it to teach you astrophysics, you might not know anything, and it might teach you the completely wrong stuff. You would be none the wiser, so be careful with that. Secondly, sometimes your teachers just are better. They are more knowledgeable, that like ChatGPT is not up to date, blah blah, and that's okay. Like, you can just email your teacher. Like, if you look at this, for example, I asked ChatGPT a question about substitution and mutation rates in viruses, in DNA and RNA viruses, and it gave me a really long answer that didn't answer my question, or it didn't give me what I wanted to know. But the teacher who gave the lecture, well, she knew exactly what I was talking about, and when I asked her, this was her answer, and it was so much more concise and much more to the point that it was like 10 times more valuable what ChatGPT said, and it only cost me a bit of effort and her a bit of effort. So with small queries or stuff like that that are specific, that only your teachers might know, or where your teachers might know best, sometimes it's just easier to ask them. But overall, this is how I'm studying now for like physiology, especially we have orals which hinge on us being able to explain concepts. I found this is like a great way to find if I can accurately and concisely explain something, and at the same time receive immediate objective feedback in return. But that's it for this video, and I'll catch you guys next week-ish, maybe, perhaps. Subscribe.